it's Miss Betby's. I'm back again to do some reading today for 3rd grade, and I'm very excited because today we're going to finish a story that we started on Monday called The Junkyard Wonders. So I want to go ahead and revisit our standard, which is our objective, our reason for reading today. And I want to hit on what that is and how it's going to change just a little bit today. Okay? So our standard is to recount stories. So on Monday we said if we are recounting, that means that we are retelling. Okay, now we do want to make sure that we are going back in text when we retell and look for those details and those events in the order that they happened in order to put them in that correct sequential order. Now, we are going to continue with this today, but now we're adding another piece. Today we are going to be determining the central message and explaining how it is conveyed, and remember, conveyed means how it's communicated through our key details, okay? So we started on Monday, we started our story, and we got through the beginning and the middle, most of the middle, not the entire middle, and we created this chart right here, okay? We said, we wrote down a lot of things, and so I want to review with you what were those things, because some of you may not have been able to watch us on Monday, and you might be wondering what it is that we're talking about. So let's look at that. So our story that we were reading was called The Junkyard Wonders, okay? So in our story, Junkyard Wonders, after reading the first part of the story, we determined that we had several main characters. We have Patricia, who the book refers to as Trisha. That's her nickname. Mrs. Peterson, who's the teacher. And then we have Tom, Jody, Gibby, and Ravan, who were, they ended up being Trisha's friends and in the same vanilla tribe as her, which is what they refer to her group that she works with in class for assignments when they work collaboratively. So our setting, our story is taking place, that's our where, is taking place in Michigan in a school. So if you remember correctly, Trisha stayed back with her dad. She would usually go visit him in the summer, and she decided to stay with her dad and her grandma for a year of school to try it out because when she was at her old school, she had a little bit of trouble, so she wanted to try something new. So this is going to lead us into our plot, and I'm going to lead more into those events I just started hinting at there. So our problem in this story is that Trisha and her friends that she winds up making lack self-confidence in themselves because they realize that they're different than most kids, okay? And so in the beginning of our story, Trisha's excited because, like I said, she's decided to stay with her dad, and she's going to go to this new school where she feels like people don't really know her and they don't know that she struggles with reading. That's how she's different. That's what we discovered in the first part. And Trisha learns she had some friends that she'd made in the neighborhood, but she quickly learns that they don't really want to be her friend anymore. And so once she gets into this classroom, and then it starts to make her feel bad. She realizes that this class, they refer to it as the junkyard, okay? And so she finds out that the junkyard means that they're all different, and just like in a junkyard, there's lots of junk. And she decides maybe this isn't the place for her. Maybe she shouldn't have stayed here to try to go to school. But then she begins to make some friends, and it's a lot of friends in her class, like I said, in her vanilla tribe is what it's called. And they work together in groups, and they quickly become best friends. So now she has a lot of friends, and she decides, hey, maybe this isn't so bad. I'll stay. And they're getting picked on a lot, she and her friends, and they get real down in the dumps. And we left off on the page in the book where Mrs. Peterson took the class to a junkyard. She takes them to a real junkyard, and her hopes are to show them all the great things that are at a junkyard. She wants them to see that it's not just junk there. So I'm going to pick up here, and we'll continue reading. So remember, as we're reading, I want you to really pay attention to the rest of the details because we want to determine that central message. What is that lesson that we can learn from this story today? And we should be able to do that as we conclude the book. For the next few weeks during the last hour of class time, we worked on our new inventions. As we hammered and sawed and cut, Mrs. Peterson read to us Great Expectations, David Copperfield, and sometimes poetry. But every day, Mrs. Peterson reminded us, some people look at things the way they are and cry. Why? But I want you looking at things and to see what they could be and ask, why not? Gibby was the boss of our plane project. We removed all the outer skin, built in new balsa struts, and repaired a lot of the skeleton. Ray Van replaced the old skin with pure silk. Finally, we painted the rebuilt plane with low resistance lacquer. But would it fly? So remember, it was a model airplane from the Junkyard, and a lot of the group really didn't want it at first because they thought this is something that's already made, but their plan is to make it into something even better. The day came when we were to present our stupendous projects. The Cinnamon Tribe was first. They unveiled a tangled sculpture of hollow tubes. Well, Miss Peterson asked the Cinnamons, what is your invention? A vibraphonium, the Cinnamons called out. It took 3 people to play it. Fabulous. The Almonds made a hanging wall maze full of leaves, fulcrums, and counterweights. When ball bearings were loaded into the top, they clattered down, bounced, shivered, and jumped as they ran through the maze. Stupendous. When the Lemons uncovered their device, none of us could figure out what it was. This is perpetual movement. Dallas Schaefer gave his invention a shove. It leaned way forward, ringing bells, pulling at springs, and twisting back and forth. We must have watched that thing for 15 minutes. It just did not stop. When it was the Vanilla's turn, Gibby pulled the covering off. But that's just an old model airplane, Booth Schaefer called out. Wrong, Gibby shouted back. This here airplane is going to defy gravity. This baby's going all the way to the moon. Everyone laughed. Mrs. Peterson spoke up. If Gilbert says it's destined for the moon, I, for one, believe him. Come on, Gibby. Will that thing fly? Someone shouted. Oh, it will fly all right. We flew it like a kite off Putnam's Hill, Jody trumpeted. We had. That was off a hill for it to fly by itself. We need a propulsion unit. He means a motor, I added. And we found the perfect one. It will take the plane right into the sky. The trouble is, it's expensive. That's when the tribe stepped in, all of them. Mrs. Peterson asked the whole class if they'd help raise money for the motor. Everyone cheered. It was unanimous. They would. Okay, before I move on, I want to call your attention to these 2 previous pages. I want you to look at the class. So here's Mrs. Peterson. Look at their faces. Look at what they're doing. I want you to think about and be able to kind of describe, what are they doing here? Okay, so here was the page where they were actually working on building their projects. And look at their faces. They're all smiling. They're happy. Do they look like they're learning to you? They look like they're learning to me, and they look like they're working really well together. So I wanted to point that out to you. I see similar things on these pages. Okay, so I see a lot of learning going on in Miss Peterson's class, but I see them having a lot of fun as they do it. All right, so let's see what they decide after they raise this money for a motor. For the next few weeks, all of the moms made cakes and cookies and sold them at bake sales. Our dad sponsored car washes. All of us Junkyard kids used things we had gotten from Mr. Beach's and made gadgets to sell. By the spring, we had made enough money to buy the perfect motor. The next thing to do was set a date for launch. We wanted everyone in school to see it. That's when Gibby thought of the school science fair. Perfect, Jody said. He had started missing a lot of school, not feeling well. When he was there, Ray Van was at his side. Sometimes she even helped him climb the stairs. We could launch it from the school roof and it would fly right over the field where the fair is. The class cheered. Maybe Mrs. Peterson said, but wait, this magnificent airship has to have a name. Everyone started calling out names like Fabulous Flyer and Windy Wings. Jody stood up. He sure looked pale. I think she needs to be called the Junkyard Wonder because we made it out of junk and because we Junkyard Wonders made it. That plane is us. So look at Jody here. They said he looked pale, and you can see he does, doesn't he? I wonder what's going on. Do you remember what they said his difference was in the beginning? I remember him saying he grew faster than everybody else. So let's see what happens. It was just a week later when Mrs. Peterson was late. She was never late. Her eyes were red and she looked sad. "Please sit down. I have some very bad news." There was silence. "We have lost Jody Beach. He passed away last night in his sleep." Then she put her face in her hands and cried. "How?" I managed to sputter. Ray Van and I held hands. Jody had a disease that made his body grow faster than it should. It just kept growing and growing so fast that his heart couldn't keep up. "And it just gave out," Miss Peterson answered. Later that day, the whole class went to the woods behind the school to collect flowers and to remember Jody. "Now, I know what the plane has to be called," a voice called out. Then, to our shock, we realized it was Ray Van. Why is everybody shocked that Ray Van is the one speaking? Oh yeah, she doesn't talk. Nobody's ever heard her talk. None of us knew she could talk. He wanted it to be called the Junkyard Wonder. That is what it has to be. Tears rolled down her cheeks. All of us agreed. Gibby's dad mounted the motor on the machine and placed it on the table at the back of his workshop. When we saw it, we all gathered around. It was so beautiful. We tried it out more than once from the hill in the back of Gibby's house. It seemed to work, but would it work from the roof of the school on a fair day? And would we even get a chance to try? The stairway to the roof was always locked. Maybe Mr. Weeks, the janitor, could help us get to the roof. The day before the fair, we could hardly contain ourselves. Would newspapers be there? Scientists from a nearby university? We huddled together out on the playground, chattering about our plans for the launch. "Cheese it! Look who's listening," Tom warned. It was Barton Poole. He'd heard everything. He leaned into Gibby's face. "Your dad wears skirts." Then he sneered. "And no one's allowed on the school roof. Got it? No one. And I'm telling the principal about your dumb plans." So we've met him before. He's kind of our bully in the story. He's very mean to the other kids, that old Barton Poole. And sure enough, when we got back to our schoolroom, the principal was waiting for us and Barton Poole was with him. I've been informed of your plans for the science fair, Mrs. Peterson. There will be no launching from the school roof and no fuel-driven airplanes anywhere on the school grounds. It could be very dangerous. Mr. Weeks will keep your plane in the janitorial closet until the end of the school year. The principal turned on his heel and left the room. Mr. Weeks looked very sad as he carried the Wonder out of the room. "Sorry, kids," he said. We were stunned. Ray Van started crying. "This was going to be for Jody," she whispered. Mrs. Peterson said nothing for a time. Then she began. "We are going to launch the Wonder tomorrow, just as we planned, and from the roof. Mrs. Peterson told us to be at Mr. Weeks' closet tomorrow morning, the morning of the fair." Let's see what happens. Our secret weapon turned out to be Mr. McDonald, Gibby's dad. If Mr. McDonald stayed with us during the launch, the principal was okay with it. We couldn't believe the good news. Mr. Weeks handed the Wonder to Gibby's dad. "Let's take her up," he said to us. On the roof, we could see kids pouring onto the field to look at science exhibits that were being set up. Ray Van pulled gorgeous silk streamers that she had hand-painted out of a bag and let them stay rolled up at the edge of the roof. Then, with Tom's help, Gibby and his dad put the Wonder in place. They carefully connected the engine to a car battery, then primed the pump to deliver the fuel from the tin sitting next to it in the engine. Then they pumped the fuel into the plane. We all stood back and watched. "Maybe it'll go all the way to Lansing," I speculated. "Maybe even to Detroit," Tom said. "Maybe around the whole world," Ray Van whispered. "No," Gibby said with a grin. "This baby's going all the way to the moon." So Ray Van started talking. She whispers, but she's talking. When the whole school assembled on the field, Mrs. Peterson signaled Gibby's dad to begin the countdown to start the engine. Mr. McDonald knelt in front of it a while. Gibby held the plane still, spinning the propeller over and over again. But the engine didn't catch on. We held our breaths. "Pump the intake again," Mr. McDonald said to Gibby. He asked some of the boys to hold on to the Wonder. "And you have to let it go at just the right moment or it will bank left or right. Understand?" He spun the propeller a few more times, and then with a loud bang, a roar, the propeller started spinning. Blue smoke puffed out. Someone in the field yelled, and everybody looked up at the roof. That was when Ray Van unfurled her banners down the side of the building. Almost to speed, Gibby's dad hollered, 10, 9, 8. When he got to 1, Mr. McDonald hollered, let her go. The Junkyard Wonder shot out of everybody's hands. It was airborne. First, it went out over the field. Then, as suddenly as it started, it sputtered and seemed to stall. Then the engine roared to life again with a noise that was deafening. That means it was really loud. The Wonder's nose pointed straight up and up, straight toward the sun. We all ran to the wall of the roof and watched breathlessly as it streaked through the cloud cover and then appeared above. Ever skyward, straight to the stratosphere. We all watched until it became a speck in the sky. Then we couldn't see it anymore. Even though the science department from the local university was there, along with the school board and the newspapers. For all of us, it was only Mrs. Peterson who mattered. And Jody. Tears glistened in Mrs. Peters' eyes as she watched the Wonder climb into the heavens. Like I said, Gibby whispered, that baby's going straight to the moon. Okay, so did their invention do what they had hoped that it would do? If you're thinking yes, then you were correct, because it did. They wanted it to fly higher than any normal model airplane. It would have just been ordinary and average. They wanted it to be better than that, and it was. It was. So in the last part of this story, it said they have their success going on, and it says, even though the science department from local universities was there, along with the school board and the newspapers, it said for all of us, the only person who mattered was Mrs. Peterson, okay? And also Jody, their friend who had died. But why do you think about Mrs. Peterson throughout this story and her relationship with the students in her class. Why do you think that she is the only one that matters to them in this situation? Think about that for a second. Okay, so I'm going to come back to that shortly. All right, so what we're going to do now that we have finished our story is we're going to come back to our charts, and I've made a new chart today. We're going to take these details that we came up with from the beginning, middle, and we're going to add the ending details, and then we are going to determine that central message. We're going to use those details to see how are they communicating to us that lesson that we can learn, okay? So today, we have several new details, but we have even more from the beginning and the middle. So we kind of reviewed these before we started. We have Trisha's moved to a new city to go to school where her dad lives. And at first she's not sure about it. She doesn't like being in the junkyard class with the kids who are different. But then she realizes that they all become really great friends and they have a really great relationship and they learn a lot from each other, and she develops these very great relationships, and so she's very thankful for those. Then the class begins working on a big project where they go to the junkyard and they are able to see that the junkyard doesn't have just junk. It has things that can be treasures that can be remade into new things, and that all the groups work on making something. So the vanilla group, which is the vanilla tribe, they take a model airplane and they make it even more wonderful, okay? And then today, if we go back in our text, we can see that the class, they completed their projects, they present their projects, and then the next big event that occurred in our story today after they did that was that their classmate Jody passed away. And in that time, of course, they're all very sad. They miss him. He was one of their best friends, and they mourn his loss, and they keep moving forward to do this project in his memory almost. And so they get to the project. They get their motor. They come together as a class to raise money for a motor that the group needs so that they can actually put this project into the science fair. And so once they do that, they are able to show everyone in that school who doubts that group of children, they're able to show them that they can do things. They can do great things, even though they may not necessarily be just like everyone else, okay? So if we take all of those details, for time's sake, I'm not gonna rewrite everything up here. We'll just carry these over and add our new details. And so if we look at all of these details, okay, I've put stars by some of them. I looked back and said, in the beginning, Mrs. Patterson introduces herself and welcomes the class by telling them that they're all geniuses and giving them the definition of genius. And then she informs them that they're called the Junkyard, and the tribes in her class are always, she has them working on a lot of group assignments where they work together, they collaborate, and they become friends. But most importantly, she's making learning fun for them, and she's making a community of learners. Then she tries to uplift the kids when they're sad and just teach them that they do have possibility and they do have potential. Then the vanilla group, when they present their project, Gibby starts to reassure the rest of the class when they doubt him that no, this is a great project, and this plane's going to fly all the way to the moon. And something that I noticed there is that in the beginning, this group of kids would have never thought that they could do something like that. But because of their teacher, Mrs. Peterson, they've learned to believe in themselves and be able to do these things that they never thought were possible. So if we think about that, let's think about what could we learn from this story. What do you think that message is? Thinking about those details and how they're communicating that to us, what do you think we could be learning from this story? And I'll go ahead and give you a hint. So there can definitely be more than one lesson that we can learn. And with a story this long and as deep as it is, and depending on your point of view, you could have some different ideas. So I'm going to share with you some that I came up with, okay? So I said in this story, I noticed that Miss Peterson was really trying to get her class to believe in themselves. So if you believe in yourself, then you can do great things. That was a message I thought you could find. So if you believe in yourself, you can do great things. And they did. Mrs. Peterson believed in them, and so therefore she was able to create this belief in themselves, this confidence in them, and then they were able to believe in themselves. Okay? Also, have you ever heard that one man's trash is another man's treasure? So we noticed that throughout the story too with the junk. They took things that people thought were trash and junk and made them into something great, including themselves, okay? And then the other one is everyone has their own genius, okay? Just because one person is great at one thing, you have things that you're great at too. So I want you to remember that and remember that everyone has their own genius. So those are several central messages that we might have gotten in lessons that we could have learned from this story. And if you have more, I can't wait to hear some of those. Okay, so next week I have some fun lessons planned. I'm so excited. We're going to take this standard and do a little more with it, and we're going to have a little celebration next week. So join me next week, and I will see you for some more reading. Bye.